Welcome to the PMP Exam Prep Question Bank series. In this video, I've got 15 exam-style practice questions lined up for you, covering the kind of people, process, and business environment scenarios you'll see on the real PMP exam. Each question comes with the correct answer and a full explanation, including why the wrong options are wrong. Here's how to get the most out of this. When a question appears, pause the video, pick your answer, then hit play to check yourself. Ready? Let's dive in. Question 76. A project operates in a regulated industry where decisions must be able to withstand external audit. What practice should the project team maintain to support this? The correct answer is B. Maintain thorough, time-stamped documentation of key decisions, approvals, and compliance-related activities. A clear, documented audit trail of decisions, approvals, and compliance activities is essential in regulated environments to demonstrate compliance if the project is audited. Now, why the other options are wrong. Rely on team members' memory of key decisions if an audit occurs is incorrect. Relying on memory alone is unreliable and would not satisfy a formal audit's need for documented evidence. Document only decisions that turned out to be correct in hindsight is incorrect. Selectively documenting only favorable outcomes would misrepresent the project's actual decision history and fail to withstand genuine audit scrutiny. Avoid documentation to reduce the risk of records being reviewed is incorrect. Avoiding documentation increases regulatory risk rather than reducing it, since the absence of records is itself a compliance failure in most regulated contexts. Question 77. A project introducing a significant new way of working is being planned for an organization known for a highly hierarchical, risk-averse culture. What should the project manager do during planning? The correct answer is D. Assess the organization's culture and tailor the change and communication approach to fit it, such as involving hierarchy-respected leaders as visible sponsors. Understanding organizational culture is a core business environment competency. Tailoring the approach, for example, using respected leaders as visible sponsors in a hierarchical culture, improves the likelihood of successful adoption. Now, why the other options are wrong. Assume the same change approach that worked in a different, more agile-friendly organization will work here too is incorrect. Applying an approach that ignores the specific organizational culture risks poor adoption. Culture strongly shapes how change should be introduced and managed. Ignore culture entirely since it's not a project management concern is incorrect. Organizational culture is explicitly part of the business environment a project manager must navigate, especially for changes affecting ways of working. Mandate the change through a single top-down memo with no further engagement is incorrect. A single top-down memo, without further engagement suited to the culture, is unlikely to be sufficient for a significant change in a risk-averse, hierarchical environment. Question 78. Midway through a project, a significant shift in organizational strategy means the project's original objectives no longer align well with the company's new direction. What should the project manager do? The correct answer is D. Raise the misalignment with the sponsor or governance body so the project's continuation, scope, or cancellation can be formally reassessed against the new strategy. When a project's alignment with organizational strategy changes materially, the project manager should escalate this to the appropriate governance authority so a deliberate decision can be made about the project's future, rather than continuing on autopilot. Now, why the other options are wrong. Continue the project unchanged since it was already approved is incorrect. Continuing unchanged ignores a real shift in organizational strategy and risks delivering a project the organization no longer needs in its original form. Unilaterally cancel the project without consulting governance is incorrect. Unilaterally canceling a formally approved project bypasses the governance structure that has the authority to make that call. Keep working and wait for someone else to notice the misalignment is incorrect. Passively waiting rather than proactively raising a known strategic misalignment risks wasted investment and delayed corrective action. Question 79. An organization is deciding between two candidate projects with similar costs, but one is projected to deliver a substantially higher return on investment. All else being equal from a governance perspective, what does this suggest for portfolio prioritization? The correct answer is A. The project with the higher projected ROI should generally be favored, all else being equal. Return on investment is a standard financial criterion used in portfolio prioritization. When costs are similar, the option projected to deliver more value per dollar invested is generally favored, all else equal. Now, why the other options are wrong? ROI should never be considered in portfolio decisions is incorrect. ROI is one of the most commonly used financial metrics in portfolio and project selection decisions, so disregarding it entirely would ignore a standard governance input. The project that was proposed first should automatically be chosen regardless of ROI is incorrect. Order of proposal is not a recognized prioritization criterion on its own. Financial and strategic value, including ROI, is what governance decisions are meant to weigh. Both projects should always be funded regardless of comparative value is incorrect. Organizations have finite resources, so portfolio governance exists specifically to make comparative prioritization decisions rather than funding everything by default. Question 80. After training end users on a new process, the organization wants to measure whether the training actually improved their ability to perform the new process correctly, not just whether they attended. What should be measured? The correct answer is D. Post-training performance or competency, such as through observation, testing, or process metrics after training. To determine whether training was effective, the organization needs to measure actual post-training performance or competency, not just whether people showed up, consistent with change adoption evaluation practices. Now, why the other options are wrong? Only attendance records for the training sessions is incorrect. Attendance alone measures participation, not whether the training achieved its intended outcome of improved performance. The number of training materials distributed is incorrect. The volume of materials distributed says nothing about whether learners actually gained the intended competency. Employee satisfaction with the training snacks and venue is incorrect. Satisfaction with logistics is unrelated to whether the training achieved its actual performance objective. Question 81. A competitor unexpectedly launches a similar product feature the project was planning to deliver in 6 months. What should the project team do in response? The correct answer is A. Reassess the project's scope, priorities, or timeline in light of the changed competitive landscape, in coordination with the sponsor. A significant external market change, like a competitor's move, is a business environment factor the project should account for. Reassessing scope, priority, or timeline with the sponsor helps keep the project aligned with its actual business value. Now, why the other options are wrong? Continue exactly as planned. Since external competitive moves are outside the project's control is incorrect. While competitive moves are external, ignoring a significant one can mean losing the intended market advantage the project's business case depended on. The team should still assess and respond. Immediately cancel the project without further analysis is incorrect. Canceling without analysis is a premature reaction. The appropriate response is to reassess the situation in coordination with the sponsor, not to assume cancellation is the only option. Keep the change confidential from the sponsor to avoid concern is incorrect. Withholding a materially relevant external change from the sponsor undermines the transparency needed for good governance and decision-making. Question 82. A team is behind schedule, and a team member suggests skipping a required regulatory review step to save time. What should the project manager do? The correct answer is D. Decline to skip the required review, and instead look for other ways to recover schedule that don't compromise compliance. Required regulatory reviews exist to manage compliance risk. The project manager should protect that requirement and instead pursue other schedule recovery options, such as crashing or resequencing non-mandatory work. Now, why the other options are wrong? Approve skipping the review since the schedule pressure is significant is incorrect. Skipping a required regulatory review to save time creates compliance risk that generally outweighs the value of the time saved, and it isn't the project manager's call to waive a required control. Quietly skip the review without informing the sponsor is incorrect. Skipping a required control without transparency to the sponsor compounds the compliance risk with a governance and trust problem. Cancel the project entirely due to the schedule pressure is incorrect. Canceling the entire project is a disproportionate response to a schedule pressure issue that can likely be addressed through other, less drastic means. Question 83. During vendor evaluation, in addition to price and technical capability, the organization asks the project team to consider each vendor's labor practices and community impact. What business environment concept does this reflect? The correct answer is C. Corporate social responsibility, CSR, considerations in procurement decisions. Weighing a vendor's labor practices and community impact alongside price and technical capability reflects corporate social responsibility, an increasingly common factor in procurement and business environment decision-making. Now, why the other options are wrong? Quality assurance is incorrect. Quality assurance concerns process-driven prevention of defects in deliverables, not a vendor's labor practices or community impact. Risk transfer is incorrect. Risk transfer refers to shifting risk ownership to a third party, such as through insurance or contract terms, not evaluating a vendor's social impact. Resource leveling is incorrect. Resource leveling is a scheduling technique to resolve resource over-allocation. It has no connection to vendor social responsibility evaluation. Question 84. A project manager working in a weak matrix organization finds they have very limited formal authority over team members who report primarily to their functional managers. What should the project manager rely on most to get things done in this structure? The correct answer is C. Influence, negotiation, and relationship building with functional managers and team members. In a weak matrix structure where formal authority is limited, project managers must rely more heavily on influence, negotiation, and relationship building to secure cooperation and resources. Now, why the other options are wrong? Formal positional authority to direct team members' work is incorrect. In a weak matrix, the project manager has limited formal authority over team members, so relying primarily on positional authority is not realistic in this structure. Unilaterally reassigning team members without functional manager involvement is incorrect. In a weak matrix, functional managers retain primary authority over their staff, so unilateral reassignment by the project manager is generally not within their power. Escalating every task assignment to senior executives is incorrect. Constantly escalating routine task assignments is impractical and not how project managers typically operate, even within a weak matrix structure. Question 85. A new government regulation affecting the project's industry is an example of which category of influence on the project, and the organization's existing template library is an example of which other category? The correct answer is A. Enterprise Environmental Factor, EEF, and Organizational Process Asset, OPA, respectively. A new government regulation is external to the organization and outside its control, making it an enterprise environmental factor. while an existing template library is an internal organizational resource, making it an organizational process asset. Now, why the other options are wrong? Organizational Process Asset, OPA, and Enterprise Environmental Factor, EEF, respectively, is incorrect. This reverses the two categories. The external regulation is the EEF, and the internal template library is the OPA, not the other way around. Both are enterprise environmental factors is incorrect. The template library is an internal organizational asset the organization created and controls, which makes it an organizational process asset, not an enterprise environmental factor. Both are organizational process assets is incorrect. The government regulation is external to and outside the control of the organization, which makes it an enterprise environmental factor, not an organizational process asset. Question 86. An organization is beginning a major transformation effort, but many employees don't yet see why the change is necessary. According to Kotter's widely referenced change model, what should be established first? The correct answer is A, a sense of urgency, helping people understand why the change is necessary. Kotter's change model begins with establishing a sense of urgency, helping people understand why the status quo is no longer acceptable, before other steps like forming a coalition or communicating a vision can be effective. Now, why the other options are wrong? A detailed, finalized implementation plan for every department is incorrect. Detailed implementation planning typically comes after establishing why the change matters. Jumping straight to a finalized plan without buy-in risks resistance. A celebration of short-term wins before the change has begun is incorrect. Celebrating short-term wins is a later step in Kotter's model, intended to reinforce momentum after change activities are already underway, not a starting point. Anchoring the change in the organization's culture before any change activity starts is incorrect. Anchoring change in the culture is the final step in Kotter's model, meant to sustain a change that has already been implemented, not the first step. Question 87. A project's sponsor learns that the broader program the project belongs to has shifted priorities, and another project within the same program is now competing for the same limited funding. What should the project manager do? The correct answer is B. Engage with program governance to understand the new priorities and provide the information needed for an informed funding decision. When priorities shift at the program level, the project manager should work through program governance, providing relevant project information so the resulting funding decision reflects accurate, complete input. Now, why the other options are wrong? Advocate aggressively against the other project without engaging program governance is incorrect. Bypassing program governance to advocate unilaterally against another project ignores the proper channel for resolving competing priorities within a program. Ignore the funding conflict since it is being handled at the program level with no need for project input is incorrect. Even though the decision is made at the program level, the project manager's input about the project's status and value is important context for that decision, so full disengagement isn't appropriate. Immediately halt all project work until the funding conflict is resolved is incorrect. Halting work preemptively, without direction from governance, is a premature and disruptive response before any funding decision has actually been made. Question 88. A project has experienced a significant cost overrun, and the projected final cost now approaches the total projected benefit described in the original business case. What should the project manager do? The correct answer is C. Reassess the business case with the sponsor to confirm the project still represents good value given the new cost projection. When a material change, like a significant cost overrun, threatens the original value proposition, the project manager should revisit the business case with the sponsor to confirm whether continuing still makes sound business sense. Now, why the other options are wrong. Continue the project unchanged since the business case was already approved at the start is incorrect. A business case is meant to be revisited when circumstances materially change, such as costs approaching the level where benefits are no longer clearly justified. Continuing unchanged ignores this signal. Hide the cost overrun from the sponsor to avoid a difficult conversation is incorrect. Concealing a material cost overrun from the sponsor undermines transparency and prevents an informed decision about the project's continued viability. Automatically cancel the project the moment costs approach the benefit level is incorrect. An automatic cancellation without reassessment skips the analysis needed to determine whether the project might still be worth completing, especially if much of the value or cost has already been incurred. Question 89. A project's procurement policy now requires that vendors demonstrate environmental, social, and governance (ESG) compliance as part of the selection criteria. How should the project team incorporate this? The correct answer is D. Include ESG compliance as a formal, weighted evaluation criterion alongside cost, technical capability, and schedule in vendor selection. When ESG compliance is a required part of procurement policy, it should be built into the formal evaluation criteria used to score and compare vendors alongside other standard factors. Now, why the other options are wrong. Treat ESG compliance as optional information with no bearing on vendor selection is incorrect. If ESG compliance is a stated requirement in procurement policy, it needs to be a substantive part of the evaluation, not just optional background information. Apply ESG requirements only to the lowest cost vendor is incorrect. ESG requirements, per policy, should apply consistently across all candidate vendors being evaluated, not selectively to just one. Wait until after contract award to check ESG compliance is incorrect. Checking ESG compliance only after the contract is awarded defeats the purpose of using it as a selection criterion in the first place. Question 90. Several months after a project's closure, the organization conducts a formal review comparing the project's actual outcomes and benefits to what was originally projected in the business case. What is the primary purpose of this review? The correct answer is C. To confirm whether the projected benefits were actually realized and to capture lessons that improve future project and portfolio decisions. A post-project or post-implementation governance review exists primarily to confirm whether expected benefits materialized and to feed lessons learned back into the organization's future project and portfolio decision-making. Now, why the other options are wrong? To reassign blame for any shortfalls to specific individuals is incorrect. The purpose of this type of review is organizational learning and benefits confirmation, not assigning individual blame. To retroactively change the original project charter is incorrect. The original charter is a historical record of a now closed project. The review's purpose is forward-looking organizational learning, not retroactively rewriting a closed project's charter. To determine the project manager's next assignment is incorrect. While a review's findings might inform future staffing conversations indirectly, that is not its primary organizational purpose. Benefits confirmation and lessons learned are. And that's a wrap on this video. Nice work getting through those 15 questions. If this helped, you're going to want the complete set. All 1,080 exam-style questions, with full explanations across all 3 PMP domains, are available in my Udemy course, PMP Exam Prep 2026 ECO. 6 full practice exams, 1,080 questions. The link is in the description below. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss the next video, where I'll walk you through 15 more questions. See you in the next video!